In 1961, millions of people tuned their televisions to a courtroom in Jerusalem. Inside, sitting behind a custom-built, bulletproof glass booth, was Adolf Eichmann, one of the chief architects of the Holocaust. Prosecuting him required the Israeli legal team to bridge several specific legal gaps. Eichmann was not a citizen of Israel, and his crimes predated the existence of the state itself. To complicate matters further, the defendant hadn't been extradited through standard legal channels. He had been abducted from a foreign country by Israeli secret agents and smuggled across borders. Eichmann's defense lawyer immediately seized on these facts. By demanding the court declare the entire proceeding illegitimate, the defense hoped their client might walk free on a jurisdictional technicality. The Israeli government could have easily ordered a covert assassination, but they chose to hold a public trial in a legitimate court of law. They wanted to systematically lay out the evidence and establish a permanent historical record. The defense began by attacking the legality of Eichmann's capture, arguing that because he was kidnapped from Argentina, Israel had no right to try him. The capture of Adolf Eichmann was the result of a high-stakes clandestine operation. In 1960, Mossad agent Zvi Aharoni followed a lead to a quiet, working-class suburb of Buenos Aires. To get him out of the country, the extraction team had to bypass local authorities. A civilian anesthesiologist, Dr. Yona Elian, covertly injected Eichmann with a sedative. They dressed the heavily drugged captive in an airline uniform. El Al captain Shmuel Wedelez then walked him straight through a crowded airport, convincing guards they were simply supporting a flight crew member who had a bit too much to drink. When the Argentine government realized what had happened, they were furious. They accused Israel of violating their national sovereignty, eventually taking their complaint to the United Nations Security Council, which formally requested Israel make reparations. Despite the international outrage, the Jerusalem court struck down the defense's argument. They ruled that criminal jurisdiction relies entirely on the laws cited in the indictment, not on the method used to bring a suspect into the courtroom. So the defense pivoted to a second major objection: retroactive laws. They argued that because Eichmann was acting under the legal authority of the Nazi regime at the time, Israel was punishing him for actions that weren't technically crimes when he committed them. To defeat this, the prosecution invoked the principle of universal jurisdiction. This legal doctrine dictates that certain acts, like piracy, war crimes, and genocide, are so horrific that they threaten the international community as a whole. Therefore, any independent nation has the authority to prosecute the offenders, regardless of where the borders are drawn or when the prosecuting state was founded. This established a vital legal precedent. It meant that state-sponsored murderers could no longer hide behind their own corrupt national laws to escape international justice. With the procedural objections cleared, Eichmann presented his core personal defense. He claimed he was merely a mid-level functionary, a tiny cog in a massive machine, who never personally killed anyone. He was, in his words, just following orders. Prosecutor Gideon Hausner countered this by bringing in the paperwork. This flowchart illustrates how orders moved through the Nazi hierarchy. By analyzing the minutes of the Wannsee Conference and Eichmann's own statistical reports on the extermination progress, Hausner proved that Eichmann was not a passive participant. He was the central logistical engine, obsessively micromanaging the train schedules and quotas required to move millions of people to death camps across Europe. But Hausner knew that shipping manifests and statistical reports wouldn't convey the true horror of the crimes. To do that, he called over 100 Holocaust survivors to the witness stand. Witnesses like poet Abba Kovner provided vivid, harrowing accounts of life in the ghettos and the camps. They connected Eichmann's sterile bureaucratic paperwork directly to the physical brutality inflicted on the victims. This pivot to survivor testimony gave the world a permanent, first-hand record of the Holocaust, anchoring the legal charges in the visceral reality of those who lived through it. After months of testimony, the panel of judges rejected every defense argument. They found Eichmann guilty on all counts and sentenced him to death by hanging. Watching the proceedings from the gallery was political theorist Hannah Arendt, who covered the trial for The New Yorker. Observing Eichmann, Arendt was struck by how ordinary he seemed. She coined the phrase, "the banality of evil," to describe a terrifying truth. The architects of the world's worst atrocities are rarely psychopathic monsters. Often, they are terrifyingly normal, thoughtless bureaucrats doing their jobs. The conviction of an architect of genocide brought a legal close to the case, that the trial's enduring impact resides with the survivors. Their testimony forced the world to look past the sterile bureaucratic language and confront the human evidence of the Holocaust.